Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Paranoid Stories. Today, I am back with 10 true trucker horror stories. These narratives have been carefully crafted, drawing from the terrifying experiences of long-haul drivers, dispatchers, truck stop attendants, and others who claim to have witnessed things on the dark highways that should not exist. To protect the privacy of those involved, names and specific routes have been carefully altered while preserving the terrifying authenticity of each encounter. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Paranoid Stories for daily true horror content that will keep you questioning what lurks in the shadows. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when darkness descends upon our channel. Now let us begin our journey into the heart of highway terror. I keep telling myself I'll forget it if I just focus on other things. But it's been 8 months now, and I still check my mirrors more than I look at the road ahead. I'm a long-haul trucker. Been doing it for 14 years. The kind of guy who can tell you which rest stops have the cleanest bathrooms between here and Denver. Who keeps a thermos of gas station coffee in the cup holder and doesn't think twice about driving through the night. It's just what I do. Nothing special about it. This happened last February on I-80, that stretch through Pennsylvania where it's just dark road and darker woods for miles. I was coming up on hour 9 of my shift, maybe 30 miles west of the Brookville exit, and my CB had been quiet for most of the night. Then around 2 a.m., 2 voices crackled through. Truckers I didn't recognize, having a conversation that made me turn the volume up. The first guy, he had this older voice, gravelly. Said something like, "You heard about the white van situation out here?" The second one laughed, but it wasn't a comfortable sound. "Yeah, dispatch mentioned it. Thought it was bullshit until I saw it myself last week." "They give you the protocol?" "Flash your brights twice, don't slow down, don't stop, just keep rolling." I remember frowning at that, thinking maybe they were talking about some kind of speed trap or police sting. But then the first guy said, "I seen it 3 times now. Same exact van, same exact spot near mile marker 97, parked right on the median like it broke down, but there's never anyone inside. There's someone outside though." A pause. Longer than it should have been. "Yeah, there is." The second guy's voice dropped lower. "You flash your lights?" "Every goddamn time, and I don't look in my mirrors after. Not anymore." They moved on to talking about weather and load schedules after that, but I couldn't shake the conversation. I tried to tell myself it was just trucker superstition, the kind of stories guys tell each other to stay awake on long hauls. We've all got them. Phantom hitchhikers, ghost cars, that kind of thing. But the way they talked about it, it didn't sound like a campfire story. It sounded like a safety briefing. Mile marker 97 was about 40 minutes ahead of me. I turned the CB down and focused on the road, watching the white lines blur past in my headlights. The coffee in my thermos had gone cold, but I drank it anyway. My hands were steady on the wheel. I wasn't scared, not yet. Just curious in that stupid way that makes people slow down to look at car accidents. I hit mile marker 95 and the road curved slightly to the left. No other vehicles in sight, just my rig and the empty highway. Then 96. I caught myself leaning forward in my seat, squinting into the distance where my high beams cut through the dark. And there it was. A white cargo van parked lengthwise across the median between the eastbound and westbound lanes. No lights, no hazards blinking, no reflective triangles set out. It looked like someone had just stopped it there and walked away, except the way it sat, perfectly centered, perfectly still, made it seem deliberate. Staged almost. I should have flashed my lights right then, should have done exactly what those truckers said and kept my speed steady, but I didn't. I slowed down instead, maybe dropping from 70 to 50, trying to get a better look as I approached. The van was old, maybe from the 90s, with panels that might have been white once but were now stained with road grime and rust. The back doors were closed, the windows were dark, and standing beside the driver's side door was a figure. I don't know how else to explain it, but it was wrong. The proportions were off, too tall, maybe 7 or 8 feet, and thin in a way that didn't look human. It stood completely motionless, facing the van, one arm extended toward the door handle like it was about to open it but had frozen mid-reach. I was maybe 100 feet away when I finally thought to hit my brights. 2 quick flashes, just like they'd said. My foot hovered over the gas pedal, ready to speed back up and get past this whole thing. That's when the figure turned its head toward me. Not its body, just its head, rotating smoothly like it was on a swivel. And even though I couldn't make out any features in the dark, I knew it was looking directly at me, right through my windshield and into my cab. I punched the gas. My rig lurched forward, engine roaring as I accelerated past the van. I kept my eyes locked on the road ahead, refusing to look at the median as I passed. The whole thing took maybe 5 seconds, but my chest had gone tight and my breath was coming in short, shallow pulls. Then I made the mistake of checking my driver's side mirror. The van was still there, shrinking in the distance behind me, but the figure wasn't. I checked the passenger mirror. Nothing. Scanned the road ahead. Empty. That's when I felt it. A slight drag on the back end of my trailer, like I'd picked up some extra weight. Just a subtle shift in how the rig was handling, enough to notice but not enough to be obvious. I told myself it was paranoia, that I was psyching myself out over a stupid CB conversation and a weird roadside scene. But I checked my mirrors again anyway. At first I didn't see anything, just the dark outline of my trailer and the road behind me. Then my eyes adjusted and I caught the shape clinging to the back doors. The figure from the van was there, pressed flat against the rear of my trailer. Those impossibly long limbs were spread wide, fingers, if you could call them that, gripping the edges of the doors. Its head was tilted at an angle no human neck could manage, and even though I couldn't see its face, I knew it was still looking at me, watching me through the mirrors. I jerked my eyes back to the road, my whole body going cold. My hands were locked on the wheel so tight my knuckles had gone white. I thought about pulling over, thought about getting out and checking, but every instinct I had was screaming at me to keep driving. So I did. I drove for 3 straight hours without stopping, without slowing down, without checking my mirrors again. When I finally pulled into a truck stop just outside of Ohio, the sky was starting to lighten with early dawn. I sat in my cab for 20 minutes, staring at the steering wheel, trying to convince myself to get out and look. When I finally did, I walked around to the back of my trailer on legs that didn't feel entirely steady. The doors were fine. No damage, no marks, nothing clinging to them. But there were prints in the road grime that covered the metal, long, thin impressions that could have been fingers if fingers were twice as long as they should be. They were placed exactly where I'd seen those hands gripping. I still drive I-80, still do the night shifts. But I don't go past mile marker 97 anymore. I take the Brookville exit and loop around, even though it adds 40 minutes to my route. And whenever my CB picks up truckers talking about protocol, about rules I've never heard of, I turn the volume up and I listen. I'm a logistics driver. Ben Sterling, 39, been hauling high-value cargo for almost 15 years. Electronics mostly. Sealed shipments from secure warehouses to distribution centers. Boring work, decent pay, and I'm home most weekends. For context, I'm the kind of guy who triple checks his manifest and never misses a delivery window. I don't believe in ghosts or bad luck or any of that. I believe in fuel efficiency and keeping my insurance premiums low. 3 weeks ago, I was running a late shipment from a warehouse outside Bakersfield. High-end components, tablets, some medical monitoring equipment, worth maybe $200,000 packed in the back. I'd done this route dozens of times, straight shot down the 99, but that night the highway patrol had closed a 15-mile stretch. Rollover accident involving a chemical truck. They were rerouting everyone onto this old county road that ran parallel through farmland and nothing else. I pulled off around 11:30. The detour signs were clear enough and my GPS recalculated without issue. Figured I'd lose maybe 40 minutes, which was fine. The road was narrow, 2 lanes, no streetlights, just my headlights cutting through the dark and the occasional reflective marker on a fence post. Empty fields on both sides, not another car in sight. About 10 minutes in, I saw something in the road ahead. Small, maybe the size of a shoebox, sitting right in the center of my lane. I slowed down. I wasn't about to blow a tire over some piece of trash. And when I got close enough, I could see it clearly in the headlights. It was a music box. Old-fashioned, wooden, with this dark, cherry finish that looked hand-carved. Intricate little designs along the edges. The kind of thing you'd see in an antique shop window, not lying on a deserted back road in the middle of nowhere. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I just drive around it? Here's the thing. I'd been on the road for 6 hours already, and my mind was numb from staring at white lines. Finding something that out of place, that strange, it jolted me awake, made me curious. I put the truck in park, left the engine running, and walked over to it. The music box was heavier than I expected. Solid wood, no cracks or chips. The top had a small brass clasp, and when I tilted it under my phone's flashlight, I could see the tiny ballerina figurine inside through the glass panel on the lid. She was frozen mid-pirouette, one leg extended, arms raised gracefully. Her painted face was delicate, almost serene. There was no reason for it to be there. No houses nearby, no driveways, nothing. Just fields and darkness. But I picked it up anyway and brought it back to the cab. I set it on the dashboard, right above the speedometer, and got back on the road. I didn't touch it again. Didn't open it. Didn't wind it. Just left it there while I drove. Maybe 5 minutes later, it started playing. The sound was so faint at first I thought I was imagining it. But no, there it was. This delicate, repetitive melody. Tinkling notes. The kind that loop endlessly in those old wind-up toys. I glanced at the music box. I hadn't touched it. Hadn't done anything. But the ballerina was spinning now, rotating slowly on her little platform, and the tune was coming from inside. I should have pulled over right then. Should have thrown the damn thing out the window, but I didn't. I just kept driving, telling myself it was mechanical, some kind of vibration from the road that triggered it. Then the air changed. It's hard to describe, but the cab suddenly felt different, heavier, like the oxygen had thickened, pressing down on my chest. My ears popped, the way they do when you're climbing elevation fast, but the road was flat, completely flat. The music kept playing, that same delicate tune over and over. I reached for the volume knob on the radio, thinking I'd drown it out, but my hand stopped halfway. The air was so still now it felt wrong, like the truck wasn't moving at all, even though I could see the speedometer steady at 55. The fields outside blurred past in the headlights, but inside the cab everything was frozen, silent except for that music. That's when I looked at the ballerina again. She'd stopped spinning, and she was facing me, not toward the windshield where she should have been positioned, not mid-turn. She was facing directly at me, her tiny porcelain head rotated 90 degrees to the left, staring right into my face. Her arm, the one that had been raised in a ballet pose, was extended now, pointing at the passenger seat. I don't know how else to explain it, but my whole body went cold. Not the kind of cold you feel from air conditioning. This was internal, like ice forming in my veins. I couldn't look away from that figurine. She wasn't moving anymore, but her arm stayed perfectly straight, finger aimed at the empty seat beside me. Except it wasn't empty. I didn't see anything. I need you to understand that. There was no shape, no shadow, no figure sitting there. But I could feel it, the weight of it pressing down on the seat, the way the vinyl creaked slightly, like someone had just settled in. The air on that side of the cab felt colder, denser, and I swear I could sense something breathing. Not loud, not like a gasp or a wheeze, just the faint, rhythmic movement of air in and out right next to me. My hands locked on the wheel. I couldn't move, couldn't turn my head to look directly at the seat, even though every instinct screamed at me to confirm what I already knew. The music box kept playing. The ballerina kept pointing. I tried to speak, tried to say something, anything, but my throat closed up. The presence beside me didn't move, didn't make a sound beyond that faint breathing. But I knew that if I looked, if I turned my head even an inch, I'd see it, and I couldn't handle that. So I kept my eyes on the road, just the road, the white lines, the darkness beyond, my speedometer, anything but the passenger seat. The music looped again, the same notes, and now I could feel the cold creeping closer. It wasn't staying on its side anymore. It was leaning toward me, I swear it, like someone slowly closing the distance between us. The next mile took forever. I don't know how I stayed on the road. My vision was blurring, my hands cramping from gripping the wheel so hard. The air was so heavy I thought my lungs would collapse. Then I saw the lights ahead, the highway. The detour was ending. The second my truck merged back onto the 99, the music stopped, just cut off mid-note. The air released all at once, and I sucked in a breath so hard it hurt. I looked at the passenger seat. Empty. Completely empty. The ballerina was back in her original position, facing forward, arms raised in a dance, like nothing had happened. I pulled into the first rest stop I saw and threw the music box into a trash bin. Didn't even look at it. Just walked back to the truck and sat there shaking for 20 minutes before I could drive again. I made my delivery, finished my route, went home. I haven't taken that detour since, and I won't. I've been moving heavy equipment for 11 years. Started right out of high school, worked my way up from flagging to driving these specialized lowboys, the kind that haul excavators, bulldozers, anything that weighs more than your average house. I'm good at what I do. I know my rig, I know my routes, and I know exactly how 50,000 pounds of machinery should feel through the steering wheel. That's important for what happened. This was back in September, late afternoon run through upstate New York. I was hauling a mid-sized excavator from Syracuse to a job site near Plattsburgh, taking Route 3 because the interstate was backed up from an accident. Route 3 cuts through some pretty isolated stretches, dense hardwood forest on both sides, narrow shoulderless road, the kind of place where you don't see another car for 20 minutes at a stretch. The rain started about an hour before sunset, not the gradual kind that builds, it just opened up all at once, so heavy I had to drop to 30 miles per hour because my wipers couldn't keep up. The road turned into this tunnel of gray water and dark trees pressing in from both sides. I remember thinking I should probably pull over, wait it out, but there was nowhere to pull a 70-foot rig safely. That's when I saw him. He was just standing there in the middle of my lane, maybe 100 feet ahead. Young guy, maybe early 20s, wearing what looked like a dark jacket and jeans, both soaked through. His hair was plastered to his head. He had one arm raised, not waving exactly, just held up like he wanted me to stop. His other arm hung at his side, completely still. I started braking immediately. You don't take chances on wet roads with this kind of weight behind you. The air brakes hissed, and I felt the whole rig settle as I slowed. I was already running through protocols in my head. Hazards on, grab the radio, see what he needs, Maybe his car went off the road. Maybe he needed medical help. I came to a complete stop about 30 feet from him, close enough to see his face clearly through the windshield, even with the rain. He was pale, almost gray, and his eyes were locked on mine, not blinking, just staring with this expression I still can't describe properly. Not afraid, not angry, something else. Something blank but intense at the same time. I reached for the door handle, and that's when he wasn't there anymore. Not like he ran off to the side, not like he ducked down. He was just gone. 1 second he was standing in the rain. The next second there was only empty road and the downpour hammering against the asphalt. I sat there with my hand frozen on the door handle, trying to make sense of it, trying to convince myself the rain had just obscured him, that he'd moved, and I missed it in the second I glanced down. But I knew what I'd seen, or what I hadn't seen. There was no movement, no blur, just there, then not there. The rain was so loud inside the cab it hurt. I could feel my pulse in my throat. I told myself I was just tired, that the rain and the bad visibility had played tricks on me, that maybe there'd never been anyone there at all. Heat shimmer in reverse or something. I don't know. I just needed a reason. I put the truck back in gear and started rolling forward slowly. The rig felt different immediately. At first I thought it was just the wet road, maybe the trailer tires weren't gripping right. But it wasn't that. The whole truck felt heavier. Not like I'd lost power, the engine was running fine, but like I was pulling more weight than I'd started with. The steering had that subtle resistance you get when you're loaded too heavy, when every turn takes just a fraction more effort. I checked my mirrors. The excavator was still strapped down properly, sitting exactly where it should be on the trailer. Nothing had shifted. The chains were tight. But something was wrong. That's when I looked at the dash display. I've got sensors that read the load weight distributed across the axles. It's a legal requirement for commercial hauling. You need to know you're not exceeding your limits. When I'd started this run, my total weight was logged at 49,200 pounds, standard for this kind of load. The display now read 49,612 pounds. I stared at those numbers. 400 extra pounds. That's not a measurement error. That's not sensor drift. That's the weight of a person. Maybe two. I must have been looking at the display for too long, because when I looked back at the road, I drifted toward the shoulder. I corrected, gripped the wheel tighter. The rain hadn't let up at all. The trees were dark smears on both sides. The weight display updated every few seconds with minor fluctuations as the suspension adjusted. I watched it tick up. 49,618, 623, 635. Small increments, steady, like something was climbing onto the trailer one handful at a time, like wet fingers gripping the edge of the flatbed, pulling up slowly, carefully, adding mass pound by pound. I tried the radio but got nothing except static. Cell phone showed no signal, which wasn't unusual out here. I thought about stopping again, getting out to check the trailer, but every part of me screamed not to. I don't know why. Instinct, maybe. Or something worse than instinct. The road curved ahead and I took it too fast, felt the whole rig lean. The suspension groaned. Actually groaned like it was struggling under too much pressure. I've hauled loads at the legal maximum and never heard that sound before. 49,804 pounds. I was doing 50 now, probably too fast for the conditions, but I needed to get out of that stretch of road. Needed to reach somewhere with lights, with people, with anything except the trees and the rain and whatever was making my truck heavier with every passing second. The display kept climbing. I couldn't stop watching it. Every time I looked away and then looked back, the numbers had jumped higher. Not huge leaps, just consistent additions, like something was piling on, stacking itself higher and higher on the trailer behind me. 50,000 pounds even. $50,200. The steering was getting harder. I could feel it in my shoulders now, the extra effort needed to keep the rig straight. The wet road wasn't helping. Every small adjustment felt like pushing through mud. I started talking to myself, which I never do, just saying anything to fill the silence between the rain and the engine and my own breathing, telling myself it was a malfunction. Sensor got wet, giving bad readings. Made perfect sense. I'd get to the job site, they'd check it out, we'd laugh about it. Just a technical issue. $50,700. Something shifted behind me. I felt it through the frame of the truck, a weight redistribution that made the whole rig settle differently on its axles, like someone had moved from one side of the trailer to the other, walking back there, finding a better position. I stopped talking to myself. The highway intersection was maybe 3 miles ahead. I knew there was a truck stop there, big parking lot, always people around. I just needed to reach it. 3 miles. I could do 3 miles, 51,200 pounds. That's when the rain stopped. Just like it had started, all at once. Complete silence except for the engine and the hiss of wet road under the tires. The sudden absence of sound was worse, somehow. Made me aware of how alone I was out there. I checked the mirror again, the big side mirror that shows the whole length of the trailer. There was something on it. Not clearly, not definitively, but the way the light hit the wet metal, the way the shadows fell across the strapped-down excavator, something was wrong with the shape of it. Like there was more there than there should be, a dark mass that didn't match the outline of the machinery I'd loaded. I looked away, forced myself to watch the road. My hands were shaking on the wheel, actually shaking, and I had to grip tighter to compensate. The truck stop came into view, its lights bright and sharp after the darkness of the tree-lined road. I've never been so grateful to see a pilot station in my life. I signaled, started slowing down, felt the whole rig protest the deceleration like it wanted to keep moving, wanted to stay out there in the dark. 52,116 pounds. I pulled into the lot and parked in the commercial section, killed the engine, sat there in the sudden silence, breathing too fast, trying to decide if I was going to turn around and look at the trailer. The weight display still showed 52,116 pounds, nearly 3,000 pounds more than when I'd started. I got out, walked around to the trailer on legs that felt weak and unreliable. The excavator was exactly where I'd left it, strapped down properly, nothing disturbed. The trailer was empty except for the machine and the chains and the standard equipment. I stood there in the parking lot under the fluorescent lights, surrounded by other trucks and normal people going about their normal business, and I couldn't explain what had happened. Still can't. I unloaded the excavator the next morning, and when I weighed the empty trailer afterward, it showed the correct unloaded weight. Everything normal, everything fine, like nothing had happened at all. But I've got the dashcam footage. I watch it sometimes, even though I shouldn't. You can see the numbers climbing on that weight display, clear as anything. You can see exactly when they start, right after I brake for something the camera doesn't pick up because the rain's too heavy. The thing is, there's one frame where the rain clears just enough, just for a second, and you can see the road ahead, empty except for one detail I didn't notice until the third time I watched the footage. Wet footprints leading from where he'd been standing, straight to the back of my trailer. I've turned down every job on Route 3 since then, and I don't drive through upstate New York anymore if I can help it. I've told exactly 3 people about this, and 2 of them suggested I see somebody professional about stress. So I guess that tells you how this is going to sound. I'm a heavy equipment hauler, have been for 22 years. For context, I'm not the superstitious type. I move big machinery across state lines, make good money doing it, and I know my rig inside and out. The night this happened, I was transporting a Cat 345 excavator from Odessa to San Antonio. Routine job, good pay, nothing I hadn't done 100 times before. The trouble started around 2 in the morning on Highway 67, about 40 miles west of El Dorado. Middle of nowhere, flat scrubland on both sides, no moon that night. I felt something shift in the load. Not much, just enough to make the trailer sway slightly to the left. Could have been nothing, but when you're hauling 90,000 pounds of steel, you don't take chances. I pulled onto the shoulder and grabbed my mag light. The air outside was still, completely still. I remember that because in Texas there's almost always some kind of wind, especially out in the open like that. But when I stepped out of the cab, it felt like walking into a room, the kind of stillness that makes your ears ring. I walked around to check the chains, 4 heavy-duty restraints, 2 on each side of the excavator's base, plus the boom chains securing the arm and bucket. Everything looked tight at first, but when I tugged on the front driver side chain, I felt more give than there should have been. Not loose exactly, just wrong, like the tension had changed. I climbed up onto the flatbed to get a better angle with the ratchet. That's when I swept my flashlight across the excavator's claw, the big toothed bucket at the end of the boom, and saw the shadow it cast on the ground behind the trailer. The shadow was moving. Not swaying with the light, not shifting when I moved, just moving on its own, very slightly, like fabric hanging in a breeze that wasn't there. I held the flashlight completely still, pointed it right at the claw. The shadow kept moving. Gentle undulation, back and forth, maybe an inch or 2 in either direction. Here's the thing, I've been doing night hauls for 2 decades. I know how shadows work with artificial light. This wasn't that. This was something else. I told myself it was heat shimmer, even though it was 58 degrees. I told myself my eyes were tired. I moved the flashlight to a different angle, trying to make the shadow do something normal. It didn't change, just kept that slow, rhythmic sway. Then I noticed the weight. The trailer was sitting lower on its suspension than it should have been, not by much, but enough that I could see it. I'd loaded this same model excavator dozens of times. I knew exactly how the trailer should sit with that load. This was wrong. The shocks were compressed like I was carrying double the weight. I checked the hydraulic landing gear gauge on the side panel. The pressure reading was 7,400 psi. Should have been around 4,200 for this load. My first thought was a malfunction. Air suspension leak, something mechanical, but the tires weren't flat. The trailer wasn't tilting. It was just heavy, heavier than it had been when I'd left Odessa 6 hours earlier. I looked back at the excavator. In the beam of my flashlight, I could see tiny points of light reflecting off the metal surface of the claw. Little glittering spots, like starlight, except there were no stars that night. Overcast sky, thick cloud cover, complete darkness above. I moved the light away. The glittering stayed. Little pinpoints of light scattered across the curved steel of the bucket teeth, moving slowly like fireflies. I don't know how else to explain it, but the outline of the claw started to look wrong. The edges seemed to blur against the dark sky behind it, not in a fuzzy way, more like the shape itself was becoming uncertain. Like if I looked at it too long, I wouldn't be able to tell where the machine ended and the darkness began. The weight kept increasing. I could feel it through the trailer deck beneath my feet. Small groaning sounds from the frame, metal stress I'd never heard from this rig before. The whole assembly was settling lower, inch by inch. I jumped down and walked around to the back of the trailer, keeping my light on the shadow the whole time. When I got to where the shadow should have ended, where it should have just faded into the regular darkness of the shoulder, I could see the gravel that was compressed, pressed down into the dirt like something physical was resting on it. I knelt down and reached out toward the edge of the shadow. My hand went cold, not air cold, object cold, like touching ice. I pulled back fast and stood up, The shadow had spread. It was wider than it had been 30 seconds ago. The edges were creeping outward across the gravel, very slowly, maybe an inch every few seconds. And wherever it touched, I could hear this soft sound, almost like whispering, but not voices, more like fabric dragging across concrete. The trailer suspension groaned again, louder this time. I tried the chains one more time, thinking maybe if I could secure everything tighter, redistribute the weight somehow. I don't know what I was thinking, but when I touched the nearest chain, it was vibrating, not from the engine. The truck wasn't running, just vibrating on its own, very faintly, like a guitar string after the note's been played. That's when I looked up at the excavator's cabin and saw that the windows were reflecting light that wasn't there. The glass was showing something bright, something white, like high noon sunlight. But my flashlight was pointed down, and there was nothing else out there. I backed away from the trailer. The shadow followed me. Not quickly, not chasing, just expanding, slow and steady, like water spreading across a floor. The weight was too much. I could see the trailer frame starting to buckle in the middle. Not a lot, just enough to notice. The center support beam was bending downward under pressure that shouldn't exist. I got back in the cab. I didn't secure the chains. I didn't do anything else. I just got in, started the engine, and drove. The whole way to San Antonio, another 3 hours. I could feel the weight. The truck handled like I was pulling twice my normal load. Every incline was a struggle. The engine temperature climbed 15 degrees higher than usual, and when I checked the mirrors, I couldn't see the excavator anymore, just darkness, thick, solid darkness where the machine should have been. I delivered the load at 6 in the morning, signed the papers. The receiving foreman asked me if I had had trouble on the road because the excavator's treads were covered in dust, and the whole machine looked like it had been sitting outside for months instead of riding on a covered trailer. I didn't tell him anything. When I unloaded, the trailer's suspension bounced back up normal. No damage to the frame. Pressure gauge read normal. Everything was fine. I keep trying to convince myself the fog just messed with my head, that there's some rational explanation I haven't considered yet. For context, I'm the least superstitious person you'll meet. I drive the same routes 5 days a week, listen to podcasts about economics and sports, and my biggest concern before that morning was whether I'd make my delivery quota. It was a Tuesday in October. I'd been driving for Consolidated Regional for 3 years, same routes, same bridges, same traffic patterns. The Riverside Bridge was part of my morning routine, an elevated stretch of I-64 that curves over the water for about 2 miles. I'd crossed it maybe 1,000 times. That morning the fog rolled in thick around 6:45 a.m., which wasn't unusual for that time of year. What was unusual was how quickly it got dense. Not just thick, but solid, like driving into a wall of white cotton. Traffic slowed to a crawl, then stopped completely. I was maybe halfway across the bridge, stuck between 2 semi-trucks with my delivery van idling. Hazards clicking. The fog was so heavy I couldn't see the truck in front of me anymore, even though I knew it was only about 15 feet away. I turned off my podcast. The silence felt wrong somehow, like the fog had absorbed all the normal traffic sounds. No engines revving. No horns. Nothing. I sat there for what felt like 20 minutes, checking my phone. The GPS showed my blue dot right where it should be, middle lane, halfway across Riverside Bridge. My delivery schedule was already shot, but that's not what bothered me. What bothered me was that I couldn't hear anything outside my cab. When I cracked the window, expecting to hear other engines or maybe voices from other drivers, there was nothing. Just this thick, pressed-down quiet. Then the truck ahead of me moved. I saw its taillights glowing red through the fog, and they shifted to the left, way to the left. like the driver had suddenly decided to cut across all lanes. I waited for the sound of a collision, but it didn't come. The taillights just kept moving in that direction until they disappeared into the white. Traffic started flowing again, sort of. I eased off the brake and started rolling forward, maybe 5 miles an hour. But here's where it gets difficult to explain. The vehicle ahead of me, I think it was a sedan, though I could barely make out its shape. It wasn't driving straight. It was moving at an angle like 45 degrees off from where the road should be, not swerving, not losing control, just driving smoothly at this impossible angle. I should have stopped. I know that. But there were vehicles behind me now, and I could feel this pressure to keep moving. The fog was so thick I couldn't see lane markers anymore, couldn't see the concrete barriers that should have been on either side of the bridge. I was following the taillights ahead of me because they were the only reference point I had. That's when I realized the taillights were above me. Not way above, but higher than they should be. Like the car had driven up an incline that didn't exist. I slowed down, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. The GPS still showed me on the bridge, moving at the right speed, in the right lane. But what I was seeing through my windshield didn't match. The angle was wrong. Everything was wrong. I checked my mirrors. Behind me there was nothing but white fog. The pressure I'd felt from other vehicles was gone. I was alone. The road beneath me felt solid, but when I looked down at my side mirror, I couldn't see the bridge deck anymore. Just white, empty white space. I kept my foot steady on the gas because stopping felt more dangerous than continuing. My breath was coming short and fast, and I had to consciously slow it down. The taillights ahead of me turned again, this time rolling to the right. Not turning right. Rolling like the whole car had rotated 90 degrees but kept moving forward. I watched it happen. I saw the lights shift from horizontal to vertical, and the car just kept going, disappearing into the fog in a direction that should have sent it over the side of the bridge. I glanced at my GPS again. Still on the highway. Still en route. The little blue arrow pointing forward like everything was normal. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, so I gripped the wheel tighter. I decided to keep going straight, or what I thought was straight, because following those other vehicles seemed like a guaranteed way to drive off into nothing. But straight relative to what? I had no reference points. The fog pressed against my windows like something solid. I turned on my high beams, but they didn't penetrate more than a foot ahead. That's when I felt the tilt. Not a sharp tilt, but gradual, like the road was banking into a curve that shouldn't exist. My van started to lean left, and I corrected instinctively, steering right to compensate. But the tilt kept increasing. I was gripping the wheel with both hands, holding it at an angle that should have sent me careening across lanes, but the van stayed stable. The coffee cup in my center console didn't slide. The packages in the back didn't shift. I should have been terrified. I was terrified. But there was also this weird calm that came over me, this understanding that whatever was happening, my normal reactions weren't going to help. So I just kept driving, kept making these constant, tiny adjustments to the wheel while the world outside seemed to rotate around me. The GPS kept tracking. That's what I held on to. Whatever was happening, the GPS said I was still on the bridge, still moving forward at 12 miles per hour. Then I saw the gap. I saw the war. Not in the road beneath me, but in the fog ahead. A break in the white that showed something dark beyond. I eased toward it, and as I got closer, I realized it was the end of the bridge. The fog was thinning. I could see the off-ramp, the traffic light at the bottom, the warehouses beyond. Normal. Real. My van's wheels hit solid asphalt with a sensation that felt like dropping an inch, even though I hadn't gone airborne. The sound came back all at once: engines, traffic, a distant car horn. The fog was still there, but it was normal fog now, the kind that just makes you turn on your headlights and slow down. I pulled into a gas station at the bottom of the ramp and sat there for 15 minutes with the engine off. My hands were still shaking. I kept checking the GPS, replaying the route, trying to see if there was some glitch or error, but it showed exactly what it should: a straight line across Riverside Bridge with no interruptions. I called my dispatcher and told him I was running late due to fog. He said half the morning drivers were delayed for the same reason: heavy fog on the bridge. Some drivers had pulled over to wait it out. Normal problems, explainable problems. I finished my route that day, delivered every package, acted normal, but I requested a route change the next week, told them I wanted to avoid the bridge because of construction. There wasn't any construction. They reassigned me without asking questions. 3 weeks later, I was at a truck stop and overheard two drivers talking about the Riverside Bridge. One of them mentioned the fog that morning in October, said he'd been stuck in traffic when everything went weird. He didn't elaborate. The other driver laughed it off, blamed it on lack of sleep. The first driver went quiet and didn't bring it up again. I almost said something, almost walked over and told them I'd been there too. But what would I say? That I drove through some pocket of broken physics where the bridge stopped being solid and roads stopped being straight? That my GPS insisted everything was fine while the world outside my window stopped making sense? I've been driving specialized hauls for 17 years, oversized loads, modular homes, prefab buildings, that kind of thing. It's good money, mostly boring work, and I'm home enough to stay married. Or I was anyway. The job I'm telling you about happened 3 months ago. A Tuesday night run from Elko to just outside of Reno. Standard decommissioned modular unit, some HUD foreclosure being relocated to a salvage yard. Single wide, maybe 1,200 square feet. Completely gutted, according to the manifest. I'd pulled the same route dozens of times. I left Elko around 4 in the afternoon, planning to drive through the night. But by 11, I was fighting to keep my eyes open. There's this stretch of Highway 80 where it's just nothing. No towns, no rest stops, just desert and the occasional ranch road. I pulled off onto a maintenance turnout I'd used before, did my walk around to check the straps and the unit's positioning, everything secure. The modular sat there on the flatbed like a corpse, dark and hollow. All the windows had been removed, just empty rectangular holes staring back at me. I climbed into the sleeper berth, set my phone alarm for 2 hours, and crashed. What woke me wasn't the alarm. It was a baby crying. Not loud, not right next to me. Muffled, like it was coming from another room in a house. That specific kind of infant wailing that cycles between gasping and shrieking. I came up out of sleep confused, thinking somehow I was home, that I'd dreamed the whole drive. But I was in the cab, and the quality of the darkness outside the windshield was wrong for home. Too open, too empty. The crying continued. I sat there trying to locate it, and that's when I heard the television, the low murmur of voices, that particular acoustic quality of TV audio coming through walls. Then underneath it, or maybe woven through it, I heard two people talking, a man and a woman, their voices rising and falling in that rhythm you recognize instantly as an argument. Not yelling, but that tense, controlled kind of fighting. I told myself it was the highway, some acoustic trick from a semi passing on the road. But we were pulled off, and I hadn't heard any traffic in either direction for the last hour before I'd stopped. I told myself it was a ranch house nearby, sound carrying weird across the desert. But when I leaned forward and looked out, there was nothing but empty land in every direction. Not a single light except the stars. The sounds were coming from behind me, from the modular home on my flatbed. Look, I've had auditory hallucinations before. Once when I was sick with the flu and running a fever, and once after staying awake for 30 hours straight on a deadline run. This felt different. The sounds had texture, specificity. The baby's cry had that wet, congested quality. The TV had commercials, the volume slightly louder than the program. The argument had pauses, the rhythm of two people who'd had the same fight before. I grabbed my flashlight and got out of the cab. The air was cold, that dry desert cold that pulls moisture right out of your lungs. I walked back along the driver's side, my light cutting through the dark, and played it across the side of the modular unit. One of the windows, fourth one back, what would have been a bedroom maybe, had light coming from inside it. Not bright light. The soft, warm glow of a lamp in another room, the kind that bleeds under doorways. It flickered slightly, like someone had walked past the source. I froze there with the flashlight shaking in my hand, listening. The baby had stopped crying. The TV continued its low mumble. The man's voice said something I couldn't make out, and the woman responded, sharp and quick. My wife's voice. I don't know how else to explain it, but I knew that particular tone, that specific cadence, the way she clips the end of her sentences when she's trying not to wake our daughter during an argument. Our daughter, who was 9 months old at the time. I moved closer to the unit, my boots crunching on the gravel, and that's when I heard my own voice come from inside. Just a few words, muffled by distance and the walls of the empty structure, but unmistakable. The same argument Elena and I had before I left for this run. The same fucking fight about me being gone too much, about her handling everything alone, about money and childcare and resentment that had been building for months. The light in the window shifted, dimmed slightly. I heard footsteps inside the unit, the hollow sound of shoes on particle board flooring, but the manifest said, gutted. No flooring, no interior walls, just the shell. I climbed up onto the flatbed. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I just leave? Here's why. Part of me needed to prove it wasn't real, that I was asleep or sick or losing my mind in some diagnosable way. The alternative was worse somehow. I needed to shine my flashlight through one of those empty window frames and see nothing but darkness and the far wall. The metal of the trailer was ice cold under my palms. I pulled myself up and moved toward the nearest window opening, the one where I'd seen the light. As I got closer, I could smell something, cooking. That specific smell of reheated pasta sauce, which is what Elena makes when I'm gone because our daughter will actually eat it. I looked through the window. There was a hallway. Beige walls, framed photos I couldn't quite make out, a small table with keys and mail on it, warm light spilling from a doorway at the end. The sounds were clearer now, no longer muffled. The television was playing one of those home renovation shows Elena likes, and I could hear her moving around in what I knew, somehow knew, was our kitchen. I pulled back, nearly fell off the trailer. My breath was coming in short, uneven pulls. I looked at the outside of the unit again, and it was exactly what it should be. A stripped modular home, blank and hollow, with empty window frames and missing doors. But when I looked through the window again, the hallway was still there. The photos on the wall, our wedding picture, Elena's college graduation, the ultrasound image we'd framed, our home, 340 miles away, somehow inside this shell I was dragging across the desert. I heard my daughter start crying again, and Elena's footsteps moving toward her room. I heard my own voice, still arguing, saying things I'd said 2 days ago. And then I heard something I hadn't heard during our actual fight. Elena crying, soft and exhausted, the sound she makes when she thinks she's alone. That broke me. I jumped off the trailer, got back in the cab and started driving. Didn't unhook, didn't check if it was safe, just dropped it in gear and pulled back onto the highway, and I drove the remaining 200 miles without stopping, without looking in my mirrors, with the radio turned up as loud as it would go. The sounds faded somewhere around Winnemucca, or maybe I just stopped being able to hear them over the radio and my own blood pounding in my ears. When I delivered the unit at dawn, I didn't do my usual walk around. I unhooked, signed the papers, and got out of there, and I called Elena from the road. She was fine, tired but fine, said she'd had a quiet night, that our daughter had slept straight through for once. She asked if I was okay. I said I was just tired. The thing that keeps me up now isn't the sounds or the light or the impossible hallway I saw inside an empty shell. It's that when I looked through that window, when I saw our home in that gutted structure, the table with the keys and mail, there was a stack of papers I recognized. Divorce papers. The ones Elena's had in her desk drawer for 6 weeks now that she thinks I don't know about. I haven't taken a hall job since. I told my dispatcher I'm dealing with some medical stuff, which isn't exactly a lie. Elena keeps asking when I'm going back to work, and I don't know what to tell her. We're bleeding through our savings, and the fights are getting worse. And sometimes late at night I can hear our daughter crying through the walls of our actual house. And I can't tell anymore if it's really her or if I'm still hearing echoes from that thing in the desert. Look, I've told exactly 2 people about this before now, and both of them gave me that polite nod that means they think I'm either lying or losing it. I'm a long-haul trucker. Have been for 15 years. I drive overnight routes through Kentucky and Tennessee, mostly empty stretches where you might see another vehicle every 20 minutes if you're lucky. I'm not the type who spooks easy. You can't be. Not when you're alone in a cab for 10 hours at a time. I've seen plenty of weird stuff on these roads. Deer that seem to appear out of nowhere. Fog so thick it looks solid. Once I swear I saw ball lightning, though I'm still not 100% on that one. Point is, I'm used to the dark, used to being alone, used to my own headlights being the only thing between me and total blackness. This was about 4 months ago, middle of September. I was running my usual Tuesday route heading south on Highway 90, the stretch between Burkesville and the Tennessee line. No moon that night, the kind of dark where your headlights feel like they're barely making a dent. I'd been driving maybe 3 hours, still had another 2 to go before my scheduled stop. That's when my headlights started flickering. Not like a loose connection or dying battery. They'd go bright, then dim, then bright again in these weird, irregular patterns. I tapped the high beams a few times, checked my dashboard. Everything looked normal. Battery gauge was fine, no warning lights. But the flickering kept going, getting worse, making the road ahead pulse in and out of visibility. I started slowing down, thinking I'd need to pull over and check the wiring, when I noticed something in my side mirror. Headlights behind me. Except they weren't headlights. They were too high up, and there was something off about how they sat in the dark, like they were absorbing light instead of reflecting it. Then my headlights stopped flickering, just like that, steady and normal again. I looked in the mirror again, and that's when I saw it properly. A tanker truck coming up behind me in the left lane. Big rig, same class as mine, but completely dark. No running lights, no clearance lights on top, nothing. Just this massive dark shape cutting through the black. I've been doing this long enough to know that's not legal, not safe, not anything a real driver would do. I eased off the gas a little, figuring I'd let this idiot pass and then maybe call it in to the state police. But as the tanker pulled alongside me, I realized I couldn't hear it. At all. You know how loud these rigs are. The engine noise, the road rumble, the air brakes. Even with my windows up and my own engine running, I should have heard something. But there was nothing. Complete silence from the truck running parallel to me, maybe 10 feet away. I glanced over, and that's when I noticed another one. Same exact truck, same dark shape, pulling up behind the first one, and another one behind that. A whole convoy of them, all identical, all completely unlit, all moving in perfect silence. My hands were getting sweaty on the wheel. I pressed the gas, trying to speed up and get past them, but they matched my speed exactly. 70 miles per hour, 75, 80. Didn't matter. They stayed right there, boxing me in. One beside me, more behind, and then I saw in front, 2 more, pulling ahead in both lanes. I was surrounded by them now. 7, maybe 8 of these things, all moving in perfect formation. The road was straight here, flat Kentucky farmland on both sides, nowhere to turn off. My CB radio was sitting right there on the dash, and I grabbed it, switched to channel 19, the trucker channel. "Anyone else seeing this?" I said. My voice sounded strange, too high. "Convoy of dark tankers on 90 southbound." Static. Then a voice, faint and distorted. "Seeing what?" "The tankers," I said. I looked at my mirror again. They were still there. "The unmarked trucks. There's like 8 of them around me." More static. The voice came back, clearer now. "Ain't nobody on 90 but you, buddy. GPS shows clear." I put the CB down. My mouth had gone dry. The tanker beside me was so close now I could have reached out my window and touched it. I looked over at it, trying to see some kind of company logo, some identification, anything. The tank itself was dark metal, no reflective strips, no hazmat placards, completely blank. Then I looked up at the cab. Here's the thing, and I know how this sounds, but there was a window there. Dark tinted glass, just like mine, and I could see a reflection in it, a perfect reflection, of a driver's seat, steering wheel, dashboard lights, my driver's seat, my steering wheel, my dashboard, but the seat was empty. I jerked my eyes back to my own windshield, hands tight on the wheel. I was still there, still driving, still solid. But in that reflection, the cab was empty. No one at the wheel. The truck driving itself. I don't know why this detail stuck with me, but the reflection was too perfect. Like looking in a mirror, except the angle was all wrong. I shouldn't have been able to see into my own cab from that direction. It didn't make physical sense. I tried speeding up again. 90 miles per hour on a rural highway in the dark, which is suicidal, but I didn't care. The tankers matched me exactly, not pulling ahead, not falling back. Just maintaining that exact same distance, that exact same speed. This went on for miles. I counted the mile markers going past. 15 of them before anything changed. 15 miles of being boxed in by these silent, dark trucks with their impossible reflections. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I couldn't get a full breath. You know that feeling when you're a kid and you're sure something's in the dark with you, but you can't see it? That's what this was, except I could see it. I just couldn't understand it. Then at mile marker 127, they started to fall back. Not all at once. One by one, starting with the ones behind me, they just decreased speed, fell away into the darkness. Within a minute, they were all gone. I was alone on the highway again, just my headlights and the empty road. I pulled over at the next exit, hands still shaking so bad I could barely grip the wheel. Sat there in a closed gas station parking lot for 2 hours before I could calm down enough to finish my route. I've driven that same stretch maybe 20 times since then. I always tense up around mile marker 112 where they first appeared. Last week I was coming through around 2 a.m. and my headlights started flickering again. I damn near pulled off onto the shoulder right there, but they stopped after a few seconds. Nothing appeared in my mirrors. I've been checking my fuel logs from that night, trying to make sense of it. The thing that keeps me up is this. According to my trip computer, I should have burned through a quarter tank during those 15 miles, the speed I was going, but the gauge barely moved. Like those miles didn't fully happen, like maybe I wasn't the one driving. My name's Mike O'Connell. I'm 44, been driving long haul for 16 years, and I'm the kind of guy who listens to sports radio and drinks gas station coffee. I don't do ghost stories. I've slept in my cab in every state west of the Mississippi, and before that night in Arizona, the worst thing I'd ever encountered was a drunk trying to break into my trailer at a truck stop in Nevada. This was late October, 3 years back. I'd picked up a load in San Diego, headed for Albuquerque. My dispatcher knew I preferred to avoid the big truck stops when I could. Too much noise, too many lot lizards, too many guys running their engines all night. There's this old rest area off the 10, maybe 40 miles east of Blythe. It's one of those places the state pretty much forgot about. No facilities anymore, just a cracked parking lot and some dead landscaping. But it's quiet, and quiet is what you need when you've got a 10-hour break and you actually want to sleep. I pulled in around 11 p.m. There were no other vehicles, not one. The nearest light was probably 5 miles back on the highway. I did my usual routine, logged my hours, ate a protein bar, brushed my teeth with a water bottle, locked the doors. I sleep in the bunk behind the seats, and I've got blackout curtains I pull across. By midnight, I was out. The first time it woke me up, I thought it was a dream, just this tiny sound. Tap. One single tap against glass. I lay there in the dark, listening, but there was nothing else. I checked my phone. It was 1:47 a.m. I figured maybe a moth or a beetle hit the window and I rolled over. Tap. This time I was awake enough to know it was real. It came from the driver's side window, right next to where I'd been sitting earlier. Not a random impact. It was deliberate, controlled, like someone taking a small pebble and deliberately striking it against the glass once. I pulled the curtain back and leaned into the driver's seat, looking out. The window was fine, no crack, no mark. Outside was just darkness. The parking lot lights had been broken for years. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it out, sweeping it across the empty asphalt. Nothing. Not a person, not an animal, not even trash blowing around. I sat there for maybe 5 minutes, just watching. My windows were up. Doors locked. I told myself it was thermal contraction or something. The cab cooling down, metal adjusting. I've heard all kinds of weird noises in trucks over the years. I went back to the bunk. At 2:23, it happened again. Same sound, same single tap, but this time it was on the passenger side. Here's the thing, and I know how this sounds, but I hadn't heard anyone walking around the truck. The gravel in that lot is loose and loud. You can hear footsteps from 20 feet away. But there'd been no footsteps. Just silence. Then that single tap. I didn't want to look. I don't know why, but something in me absolutely did not want to pull that curtain back. My mouth had gone dry. I could feel my pulse in my neck. But I looked anyway because the alternative was just lying there waiting. Nothing outside the passenger window. I shined the light out, swept it across the empty lot again, aimed it at the ground near the truck. There was nobody there. I got out my phone and almost called 911. I had it open, finger over the buttons. But what was I going to say? Someone's tapping on my truck? They'd think I was drunk or paranoid. And honestly, what were they going to do? Send a unit out to an abandoned rest area because a trucker heard a noise? I kept the phone in my hand anyway. I turned on the cab's interior lights. If someone was out there screwing with me, I wanted them to know I was awake and alert. I sat in the driver's seat, flashlight ready, watching both mirrors. The tap came at 2:51 from behind the cab, right on the back wall of the sleeper compartment. My breath caught. That back wall is maybe 7 feet off the ground. You'd need a ladder to reach it, or you'd have to climb up the side of the truck, and I would have heard that. The truck would have shifted with the weight, but it hadn't moved. I'd felt nothing. I sat frozen, listening so hard my ears hurt. I could hear the blood moving in my head, the faint tick of the cooling engine. Nothing else. Then, I heard it on the roof. Not a tap this time. A soft drag, like something being pulled slowly across the metal above my head. It moved from the front of the cab toward the back, deliberate and slow. Then it stopped. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the flashlight. I knew, and I can't explain how I knew this, but I knew that whatever was up there wasn't going to make another sound. It was done moving. It was staying put. I couldn't see the roof. I couldn't shoot a light up there from inside. I'd have to get out to check, and every atom in my body was screaming not to open that door. I tried to rationalize it. A bird landed up there. A cat somehow climbed up. But I knew better. Birds don't climb trucks in a deliberate pattern, and the sound wasn't claws or talons. It was something being dragged, something smooth. I turned off the interior lights. I don't know why. Maybe I thought if I pretended to go back to sleep, it would leave. I sat there in the driver's seat, in the dark, staring up at the ceiling of the cab. The metal panel was maybe 3 inches above my head when I sat up straight. At 3:15, I heard it breathe. It was so quiet I almost missed it. Just a soft exhale, like air being let out slowly. It came from directly above me. I stopped breathing entirely, trying to hear it again, and that's when I realized my breath was fogging. I could see it in the faint glow of the dashboard lights. The temperature had dropped inside the cab. I checked my phone. I still had 6 hours and 41 minutes left on my mandatory rest period. The regulations are strict. If I drove before that time was up, I could lose my CDL, get fined, maybe worse. But I was ready to risk it. I put my hand on the keys. Then I stopped, because I realized if I started the engine, it would know I was about to leave. And I had this certainty, this absolute conviction, that the moment I tried to move that truck, whatever was on the roof would do something, I don't know what, but I knew it was waiting for me to try. So I sat there. For 6 hours and 41 minutes, I sat in that driver's seat, keys in my hand, watching the clock on my phone tick down. I didn't hear the breathing again. I didn't hear any movement. But I could feel it up there. The cab felt wrong. The air felt pressed down. When my 10 hours were finally up, at 10 o'clock a.m. exactly, I started the engine. My hands were cramping from gripping the keys. I put the truck in gear, pulled out of that rest area, and I didn't touch the brakes until I was back on the highway doing 70. I stopped at the first truck stop I hit, went around back, and checked the roof. There was a pattern in the dust up there. Not footprints, not handprints. Just a smooth, wide area where something had been lying flat, right above where the driver's seat is. And at the edge of it, scratched into the paint, were 4 long grooves. They were thin, precise, like someone had carefully counted out my 10-hour wait by marking each hour, then added 1 more for good measure. 3 weeks ago, I had a routine haul down to a manufacturing plant outside Valdosta, Georgia. Machine parts. 4 pallets of precision-cut steel components going to some aerospace supplier. The manifest was clean, the load was secured properly, and I'd made the drive a dozen times before. Nothing about this run felt different when I left the depot that morning. I got to the facility around 2 in the afternoon. The receiving dock was empty except for one guy in a high-visibility vest, clipboard in hand. Standard setup. I backed in, popped the trailer, and he came up to check the paperwork while I got ready to unload. Here's where it gets strange. I went into the trailer to pull the first pallet and I grabbed the one nearest the door. Makes sense, right? Except when I got it onto the dock and the foreman scanned the label, he nodded and said, "That's the one," like he'd been expecting exactly that pallet. I looked at my manifest. The pallet I'd just pulled wasn't listed. I mean, it had the right shipping label format, the right company codes, even the right weight classification. But the serial number didn't match anything on my paperwork. I told him there must be a mistake, that this wasn't part of my load. He looked at me like I was being difficult. "This is what we ordered," he said, tapping his own clipboard. "Came in on the requisition 3 days ago." I pulled out my phone and photographed his paperwork. The purchase order number matched mine. The delivery date matched. But the components listed were the ones on this mystery pallet, not the 4 I'd loaded that morning in Atlanta. "Look," I said, "I've got 4 other pallets back there that match my manifest exactly. Those are what I'm supposed to deliver." He walked to the trailer with me. I showed him the other 4 pallets, still strapped and wrapped, labels pristine. He scanned one, then another. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture did. He went very still. "These aren't on the order," he said quietly. I pulled up my manifest on my phone, showed him the photos I'd taken at loading. He looked at them for a long time, then looked back at the pallets. When he met my eyes again, his face was blank in a way that made my stomach drop. "We can't accept these," he said. "They're not in our system." "They're the whole reason I'm here," I said, and I could hear my voice getting tight. "I loaded them 6 hours ago. I have documentation. I have a bill of lading with signatures." He shook his head. "I'm showing receipt of 1 pallet, the one you already unloaded. That's what we were expecting, and that's what we're signing for. The rest needs to go back with you." I tried calling my dispatcher. Voicemail. I tried the depot supervisor. Voicemail. I stood there in that empty lot with 4 pallets of machine parts that suddenly didn't exist in anyone's system except mine, and 1 pallet I'd never loaded sitting on the dock like it had always been there. The foreman was watching me, not impatient, not annoyed, just waiting. "I need to figure this out," I said. "I can't just take these back without authorization." "Then wait here," he said. "I'll process the pallet we received." He walked into the building. I stood there next to my trailer looking at those 4 identical pallets. I checked the labels again. I checked my photos. Everything matched. The pallets were real. The weight was right. The wrapping hadn't been tampered with. I pulled out the strapping knife and cut into one. The components inside matched the manifest description exactly. Precision-cut steel, aerospace grade, each piece labeled and cushioned. Thousands of dollars in parts that, according to everyone but me, weren't supposed to be there. The foreman came back with a signature pad. "We're all set," he said. "You're good to go." "What about these?" I gestured at the 4 pallets. "Return to sender," he said. "Not our problem." I signed. I don't know why. Maybe because he was so calm about it. Maybe because every call I tried to make went to voicemail. Maybe because the sun was starting to sink and I didn't want to be there after dark. I loaded the 4 pallets back into the trailer. The foreman watched from the dock, still holding his clipboard. As I climbed into the cab, I saw him make a check mark on his paperwork. One smooth, efficient motion. I called the depot again on the drive back. This time someone answered. I explained what happened. There was a long pause. Then the supervisor said they'd look into it and told me to return the load to the warehouse. When I got back that night, I backed into the bay and opened the trailer. The 4 pallets were gone. The straps were still there, cut ends coiled on the floor. But the pallets were gone. I filed a report. I showed them the photos. They checked the security cameras, but the footage from inside the trailer was corrupted, just static. The supervisor said they'd investigate, but his tone told me he thought I'd screwed up somewhere. I pulled my phone records. Every call I'd made from that facility showed in my log, but the depot line had no record of receiving them. I've been hauling freight for 6 years. I know how logistics work. I know how cargo moves through the system. But I delivered something I never loaded, and what I did load vanished like it was never there. The manifest I photographed that morning is still on my phone, but when I tried to access the digital copy from the depot server, it showed a different load entirely. The 1 pallet. The one they received. 3 weeks ago, I pulled into this truck stop outside Laramie around 2 in the morning. There were maybe 5 other rigs scattered across the lot, all dark, all silent. I did my pre-sleep walk-around like always. Checked the tandems, the airlines, the door seals. Everything looked fine. I climbed back into the cab, set my alarm for 8 hours, and crashed. I woke up maybe 4 hours later to this sound. At first I thought it was wind, or maybe a bad bearing somewhere in the lot. High-pitched, thin, like metal flexing under too much weight. It was faint enough that I almost convinced myself I was imagining it, but it kept going. Consistent, rhythmic almost. I lay there in the dark for maybe 10 minutes before I realized it was coming from my own trailer. I got dressed and went outside. The lot was still dead. No movement, no other drivers stirring. I walked along the passenger side of my rig with my flashlight, checking the airlines again, the brake drums, listening. The sound was there, but I couldn't pin it down. It seemed to shift as I moved, like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Then I crouched down next to the rear tandems, and that's when I heard it clearly. It wasn't mechanical. It was singing. I know how that sounds. I do. But I'm telling you, it was voices. Human voices. High and distant and layered over each other like a choir buried underwater. The sound was coming from inside the tires themselves, not the wheel wells, not the hubs. The rubber, like something was trapped in there, compressed into that black, dense space, and it was singing. I stood up too fast and had to steady myself against the trailer. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the flashlight. I told myself it was the cold or exhaustion or maybe carbon monoxide from someone's engine idling nearby, but I knew that wasn't it. I pressed my ear against the side of the tire, and the sound got clearer. Mournful. Pleading. There were words in there, I think, but I couldn't make them out. Just the tone. Just the desperation. I backed away and checked the other tires. All 8 of them. Every single one had that same sound coming from inside, slightly different pitches, slightly different rhythms, but all of them singing. I thought about calling someone, dispatch, a mechanic, hell, even the cops. But what was I supposed to say? That my tires were haunted? Here's the thing. I still had 600 miles left on my route. I had a delivery window I couldn't miss, and the tires weren't flat. The air pressure was fine. There was no mechanical reason not to drive. So I did. I climbed back into the cab, started the engine, and pulled out of that lot. For the first hour, I kept the radio off. The windows cracked, just listening. The singing didn't stop. It changed, though. As the wheels turned, the pitch shifted, rising and falling like the voices were being pulled in different directions. At highway speed, it became this awful, droning hum that I could feel in my chest, in my teeth. I tried to focus on the road. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was some kind of acoustic phenomenon, air pockets in the rubber resonating at just the right frequency. Maybe I was losing my mind. But every time I slowed down for a curve or a toll booth, the hum would break apart again into those distinct, overlapping voices, and I'd hear it clear as anything. I made the delivery. I unhooked the trailer at the warehouse and drove the cab to a shop I know in Pennsylvania. I told the guy I needed a full tire inspection, all of them replaced if there was any question. He looked at me like I was nuts, but he did it. When he pulled the first tire off, I watched through the garage window, holding my breath, waiting for something to fall out, waiting for proof. There was nothing, just normal wear, normal tread. He said they were fine, another 20,000 miles easy, but I told him to replace them anyway. All of them. He charged me a fortune, but I didn't care. The new tires are silent. I haven't told anyone else about this. I still drive the same routes, still pull into that same truck stop sometimes when I'm desperate for sleep, but I always park on the opposite end now, and I never ever crouch down next to my wheels anymore. I don't want to know if it's back.